Thank you for joining us this evening to learn more about bike infrastructure here in Brunswick. We're going to have two presenters, Andrew Hamilton from our local Bike Ped Committee and Paul, I'm so sorry, I'm going to butcher, Drinan, got it, thank you, from Bike Coalition of Maine to talk about more what's going on at the state level. So before we get started, if folks could silence your phones, we would appreciate that. And how this goes typically is we'll have one presenter go and we'll ask you to hold the questions until after that presenter is done. Have a bit of question time. Second presenter, same deal, questions after. So try your best to hold on to those until the end of the presentation so we can keep this going smoothly. And there is a water fountain around the corner. It's my New England showing, as well as a bathroom. So feel free to get up at any point if you need to use those facilities. And without further ado, I'll have Andrew Hamilton come up first.
Hey, thanks. Thank you all for coming. This turns out to be a really perfect day. About 2 hours before coming here, I just did that wonderful annual ritual of lining my kids next to their bikes, measuring them compared to how tall they were in the fall, and then lifting the seats up, 2.5 inches for a winter's worth of growth. So it's really just a perfect day to be thinking about biking, thinking about this good weather, thinking about the things that we do to make biking possible. Thanks for being here. This is great. I know there are a lot of other things you can do with your time. What I am going to do to try to make this worth your time is do two things. First, I'm going to try to convince you, if you're not already convinced, that biking from a general infrastructure point of view, the bicycle friendliness of communities is something that's really important for everyone, even people who don't ride bikes. I'm going to guess that a lot of you probably already believe that because you're people who voluntarily showed up at a talk at the public library about bicycle infrastructure or are in the wrong room. If you already believe that, that's great. You're not actually the audience for this. What that does mean, though, is that some of your neighbors and your coworkers and the people that you spend time with when you're not here, they might be the audience for this, which means that this doesn't end here. What I'm going to share with you is something I want you to share with other people as well. I want to get the word out about this. I want these couple of random facts that I'm going to present not to end in this room. After I do that, that's going to be most of the time allotted to me. After that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that I have been involved with in a very small role on the local Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the BBPAC of this town, talking a little bit about how we take the big ideas that I'm going to present and turn them into practice, suggest a few ways that you can be involved, that other people can be involved, in a sort of generalized motivational sort of way. And then I'm going to step back and you'll hear from some real experts who know anything about this because I'm just making this up as I go along. Sound good? This is the plan. So we're going to start with a quiz. It's a really easy quiz. Everyone, if you've paid attention to the title, you're going to get an A+ on this quiz. So it's a one question. Who is biking for? Yes, okay, you read the first slide. This is great, right? So if we break this question down, make it a little bit more specific, we say who benefits from bike trails and bike lanes if we build those things? Who are they for? Who gets to be part of a biking culture and whose life is improved by having communities be bike friendly? These are sort of more specific ways of asking this big question. You all clearly already know the answer. You know that it is not only, these fancy Europeans, these people who are just impossibly beautiful, living in wonderful places. Yeah, this is great. You've seen people like this before. You think this is bike culture. It can be intimidating and exclusionary. That's not all that it is. So yes, biking is for them. Is biking for brave people like this who have tremendous strength of legs to carry their entire family on a giant bike like this, or have some sort of a wish to shuffle off this mortal coil and bike down a mountain like that? Yes, it is, but not only for them. These are the people, these are the images that I found from 10 seconds of Googling that made bike culture look as exclusive as possible. But it's not that. Because even if you have never done that, even if you've never done that, even if you have never pedaled at 1,000,000 miles an hour with 14,000 other Frenchmen through a perfect field, biking is still for you. And this is what I'm going to try to prove to you. Because there are 4 groups of people I'm going to focus on. 4 groups who do not ride bikes, who will still benefit from the same bike culture that these people are directly benefiting from. These are people who drive cars, people with wallets, people with bodies, and then not just people, but the rest of everyone, the rest of the entire planet. These are the four groups that benefit from biking. Maybe some of these you can already guess what I'm going to say. Some of them might be a little bit surprising, starting with people who drive cars. I drive a car sometimes. Have you ever been in a car and you get cut off by someone on a bike and they're moving along at bike speed and you want to be going along at car speed and you think, what's the point of all of these horsepower and this 2,000 tons of steel if, this little guy in spandex is slowing me down? It's a bad feeling. Those moments can make us think that biking is not good for people who drive cars, but the opposite is in fact true. Why would that be? Why is it so good for people who drive cars to have good bike infrastructure? Well, first of all, this really simple fact. If you have this many people, in each of these three pictures, that crowd of people is the same crowd, the same number of people. And here, the top of the picture represents how much space they take up on the road based on what their mode of transport is. This is not surprising, but it's kind of nice to see it laid out like this. You can ignore the part about the bus. That's cool, but we're not talking about buses today. Look at how much space those cars take up compared to those bicycles. And this is obvious, and this is actually a really important fact about traffic engineering, because when you create more space on the road, traffic goes better for everybody. It's kind of obvious. If you've ever been in a crowded room, this makes sense. But when you're trapped behind a slow-moving bike, or when you see a bike swerving in and out of the lanes, when we have these bad moments as motorists, we can lose sight of this fact. Have you ever been driving down the highway and you're just going along, doing your own thing, and traffic slows down? And it's slow, and it's stop, and it's go, and you see the cars, they're doing that thing where they they think they see an opening, and then they weave, and they think this is the faster lane, and then half a mile later, it turns out, no, that's the faster lane, and you can see everyone's personality based on how they approach that, and you're looking, and you're trying to see, where are the lights, where are the emergency vehicles, how far up is the accident, where's the construction work, and then 15 minutes go by, and suddenly it just clears up, and there was no accident, there was no construction. This has happened to you? This happens to me? Yes? I'm not insane? Okay, good. I am, but not because of that. So the reason that this happens, and traffic engineers can give you a lot of equations about this, and it's kind of cool if you want to do that, is the fact of congestion itself compounds itself in a positive reinforcing cycle. That means when there's less space between cars, when there are more vehicles in a certain amount of space, you have to drive in a different way. It becomes harder to change lanes, right? You have to look more, you have to slow down, that slows cars behind you down. It creates this sort of compacting situation where congestion sort of reifies itself into a traffic jam for no reason and then resolves with time. This is what happens when there isn't enough space on the road. Every single car that comes off the road to be replaced with a bicycle makes more space and makes that happen less. This is the dramatic illustration. But the principle is that when you have more bikes compared to the number of cars, this is counterintuitive. So listen, this is weird. The cars go faster when there are more bikes, if the more bikes means fewer cars. They've done a lot of studies about this that are kind of astonishing because bikes take up less space. It's as simple as that at a certain point. For the last decade or so, there's been a really amazing thing. If you care about traffic engineering, which you shouldn't because it's very boring, but if you're a nerd about traffic engineering, Santiago, Chile has been a really interesting place lately. They've redone basically everything all at once about the design of that city, the public transport, the highways, the bike lanes, all of these things, which means that there's basically a natural experiment. Everyone is getting in and saying, oh, well, we should do it this way, and then they make a change, and then they measure it. So there's this tremendous body of data coming out of Santiago in the last decade or so. And one of the things that's amazing to me is that they've measured, now bear with me here, this is complicated in terms of units. They measure how much horizontal road space something takes up, right? So a bike takes up like this much, and a car takes up like that much. And then they measure how fast a person can move in a different mode of transport per horizontal road feet. And then they compare that to how many people could be in the thing. So a car can transport a certain number of people, a certain distance, at a certain speed per horizontal foot space of road, and they compare all the modes of transit. Bikes win when you measure it this way. Bikes transport more people faster per horizontal road space than cars. This means, when you follow this reasoning out, I know this is very boring, but you came here, you chose to come here. This means when you follow this math out, that if you take some number of the cars and replace them with bikes, the space of the bike lane that you build for the bikes is more than offset by the decrease in the number of bikes on the road. So the cars go faster when you take the cars out, replace them with bikes, put them in the bike lane. A number of studies confirm this. It's counterintuitive because we think of cars and bikes at odds with each other. This only works if you build the bike lanes and commit to that, of course, but it's possible. Bikes are good for people in cars. This is when the cars are moving, obviously. Cars are not always moving, as you know. Most of the time, cars are parked. This is also true of bikes. Cars take up a lot of space when parked. Bikes take up a lot less space when parked. It can vary a little bit about your setting, but a good rule of thumb is that 10 bikes fit in the space that a car takes. I think of this fact every time I drive my car to the town mall in the summertime to go to the taco truck, and I'm looking for a place to park. And I think to myself, if 10 of these people had ridden their bikes, there would be 9 more spaces for me to park in, and I would already be eating my taco by now. This is how I think. Sometimes I'm on my bike, so I can go straight to my taco while other people are circling around looking for parking. But that's not relevant because we don't care about the benefits for the people on the bikes. We're only concerned tonight about the benefit for the people not on the bikes. Does this make sense? It makes sense to me. I spent a lot of time thinking about parking and thinking about how much space things take up. And I like to do arithmetic. So I was looking, there's a wonderful website called toomanycars.nyc with some people who have the same sort of problem in their brain that I have. And they did a lot of calculations, and they found out that about 2.1 square miles of Manhattan are occupied by parking spaces. This is the most densely populated place in the country. There are more people, there are more businesses, there's more money, there's more everything per square foot there than anywhere else in the country. And 2.1 square miles of it, that's 9.1% of the island, is occupied by parking spaces. Now this is fine, right? People should do whatever they want. But I was thinking about this while trying to sleep one night, and I did a little bit of math, looked at some land value tables, and came up with a rough estimate that the car parking on Manhattan Island occupies about $160 billion worth of real estate value. And I think to myself, $160 billion, I know some things I could do with that. And at least in that one place, they're using it to store cars, which is fine, I guess. But this is the cost of not being bike-friendly enough. This is the amount of space that we're devoting. I think that's a number. We're going to talk about money in a minute, but $160 billion. Whenever anyone talks to you about how much a bike project could cost, about the cost of doing something, remember that number. $160 billion, that would be the cost of not doing it in wildly oversimplified way based on my late night back of the envelope calculations, and I'm not an economist, so please don't repeat that number. But Manhattan's really far away, it's a diversion. What is it like here, just for example in Brunswick? I took a map and a ruler, and I came up with the following numbers. In the downtown Brunswick, going roughly from Fort Andros to sort of end of the town mall, a little bit before the First Parish Church, Main Street, between sort of Union and Federal, picture that sort of like a rectangle. My map and ruler tells me that there are 4,076,852 square feet in that area, and you'll just have to believe me. I did a little bit more calculating, a little bit more looking, a little bit more sleeplessness. I came up with 428,652 square feet of that devoted to car parking. If any of you are absolute savants at division, then you know that that's 9.5% of downtown Brunswick is devoted to car parking. So a little bit more than Manhattan even, but pretty much the same. 9.5% of our land in the downtown, in the dense area. Obviously, it goes down as you move out where it's more trees and grass. So this just says something. If a Martian showed up and looked at our town, they would say, oh, yeah, storing cars is what these humans are into. If we think about that space and the capacity that it has for transport infrastructure, doing something other than just storing cars and getting all of us to the whatever, local business, to the farmer's market, to the taco truck, to the library, wherever we're going, a little bit faster. All of that is about speed and convenience. Just throwing in as a quick side note, by mile traveled, if you measure by mile traveled, cars are 28 times more likely to result in a deadly accident than a bike. So, I mean, if you care about life and safety, then every person who gets out of a car and gets on a bike is way more likely to come home alive by 28 times. Driving cars is one of the most dangerous things that we do, and when we decongest the roads, anything that decongests roads makes driving safer for everyone. Just throwing that out there. Safety at the end. So that's one. The other ones are faster. Biking is for people with wallets. I can see everyone's getting excited now. Let's talk about the money. This is what really matters. I am, and I really cannot emphasize this enough, not an economist. So if you have economics questions, ask them to anyone but me. But I did find some things that some economists wrote. This trade organization, the American Bicyclists, the League of American Bicyclists, they have some wonderful, wonderful things. And I'm just going to let their words speak a little bit, moving through this kind of quickly, demonstrating some of the ways in which people who will never, ever get on a bike can benefit financially in the bottom line, because that's what really matters, right? Dollars and cents. All this stuff about getting where you're going and staying alive, very uninteresting compared to money. That was the only serious thing I've said tonight. I don't get it. Here's one example. In Salt Lake City, there's a wall of text. You don't have to read this. You don't have to care about this. I underlined the only things that mattered. When they put some bike infrastructure on Broadway in Salt Lake City, they found increased retail sales for all of the shops around there. This is intuitive, but it's kind of nice that somebody did the work and put some numbers on this. They found an 8.8% increase in retail sales. If any of you own a retail business, you would take 8.8% increase, I think. Most of us would. That's a pretty big increase for something like that. So if you want to promote business, this is an example of how that works. In New York City, there were 49% fewer commercial vacancies in the area around Union Square after they did a redesign to put in a protected bike lane. 49% fewer. That's a huge number. If you're a mayor, if you're in this sort of like city politics, these are the kind of numbers that make you just start salivating. There aren't policies that make this kind of difference, but there are. There are very few, but this is one of them. So you have fewer commercial vacancies. You have higher retail sales. In Minneapolis and Seattle, similar studies show retail employment increasing by 12.64%. 2 places after the decimal point, you know they mean business. That's jobs. That's jobs coming into your economy. The 52.44% increase in food sales. This is, I assume, only because biking makes you hungry, or also because more people moving around, more people working, more people out and about. When you make those spaces work better for people to be on the move, people go out to eat, people go shopping, people hire people to work in their shops. Many of these people don't need to be on bikes to be accruing the benefits here. More than 30% increase in food service employment in Seattle. I don't know how much of that was Starbucks, but that's a lot. And at a bigger scale, if we zoom way, way out and think about the country, Project Drawdown, they're sort of a climate activist group. They're trying to approach climate crisis from a billion directions. They do some pretty cool work here. Setting aside climate stuff, we're going to get there. But here's one of their headlines. They say, by building bike infrastructure or converting lanes rather than constructing roads, imagine a future where more people bike and our infrastructure spending goes to bikes instead of car roads. Municipal governments and taxpayers can realize 2.42 to 3.13 trillion, that's trillion with a T, in construction savings. I can't do that. And 5.9 to 8.45 trillion in lifetime net operational savings. These are huge numbers. These are speculative numbers. These are numbers that imagine a very big transformation in the way Americans live. But that's a lot of money. That's a lot of trillions of dollars that we can use on anything else if we don't use them on constructing roads for cars and replace them with bike lanes and better bike transit infrastructure. These are big speculative numbers, and I'm not an economist, so the exact details, we don't need to dwell on them very much, but I'm presenting one avenue after another of how these benefits can spread and accrue to people who are not themselves on the bike. Biking is for people with bodies. You won't be surprised if I tell you that when you ride a bike, it's good for your heart, it's good for your lungs, it's good for your legs. Fine, who cares? Not us. Because people on bikes, they can do whatever they want. Why does it matter to us if some dude over there is riding a bike and, getting like awesome quads? Basically 2 reasons, and this is actually my favorite one. This is one that excites me immensely. The first is air quality. When cities have done experiments where they basically close areas off to cars and replace a lot of the car roads with pedestrian zones and with bike roads, like bike-only roads, they find that air quality improves almost instantly. Asthma rates decrease within a matter of years. So London was one of these, Paris, Stockholm, Oslo, and a couple Italian cities. I know this because I got a parking ticket in one of those Italian cities once because I misread the sign. It was in Italian. I got the parking ticket in the mail like 2.5 years later. That's true. This works because in addition to sort of the global level, broad climate emissions that we talk about, just the very short term, the smog that comes out of a car tailpipe makes that air slightly less good to breathe for a couple of hours where that car has been. When you minimize the number of those, people don't get asthma as much. This is a small thing, it's a local thing, but it's important. The other thing which is bigger, which really astonishes me, I went very deep into this because it was exciting to me and I didn't expect it to be so cool. When other people ride bikes and they get slightly healthier from doing that, they go to the doctor less and the healthcare system as a whole saves money. Yeah, okay, but how much, right? It can't possibly be that much, right? It couldn't possibly make that big a deal. It turns out that it could. And this absolutely blows my mind. There was a study, a bunch of academics working at a number of universities in the US, they basically asked a really simple question. They were from the Midwest, and they said, what if we looked at 11 cities in the Midwest? They picked 6 states and the 11 biggest cities and the counties that surround them. So these 11 population centers in the US that they had really, really good data on. And they said, what if we imagine, just a simple hypothetical question, that half of the car rides in these cities that are less than 5 miles long, the short car rides, what if we replace half of them with bike journeys? This is big, this is really ambitious, right? But 50% is a nice round number, and they took, from that hypothetical question, they just spun out all of the things that would happen. Okay, it does this to the air quality, this many traffic collisions are changed into car-on-bike collisions, this many are avoided, there's this much benefit to these people's cardiovascular health and all of that. They ran through all of that, and what they came up with was that in these 11 cities, there was a net health benefit of $4.94 billion a year. That's in 11 American cities. If you could meet this admittedly pretty ambitious goal, but I am 100% certain that you could buy everyone in those cities an e-bike and build bike lanes along every major corridor in the Midwest for less than $4.94 billion. Probably a lot less than that. They found that there's about $3.8 billion a year saved from avoided mortality and healthcare costs. Oh yeah, about 1,295 deaths per year. You see, I'm putting some of this economics jargon, leaving this on the slide so you can tell this is for real and I'm not making it up. They found that the estimated combined benefits of improved air quality and physical fitness exceeds $8 billion a year. That seems pretty darn good to me. And that goes nowhere here does it say only for the people who are riding bikes do they get any of these benefits. This is accruing to the general population, to the general economy. This is something to think about. This is something to think about. The last one, this is really fast. You all know that it's good to bike instead of driving a car when it comes to emissions. Just throwing this out very quickly. The Cato Institute, they are not left-wing tree huggers at all. I picked them because they're the ones least likely to make too big a number. They say about 16% of emissions come from private transportation. A study from Oregon State, they made it easy. No one has to exercise too much. They said if we used e-bikes for 15% of short drives, we would reduce total US emissions by 4.5%. Obviously, that's not enough and that's not everything, but if we talk about big problems and we talk about all of the above approaches coming from all different directions, if something like this can do 4.5% of it, that's pretty darn good. That strikes me as absolutely worth it. So even if you don't ride a bike, if you plan to be alive and thriving in 50 years, if you plan for your kids to be alive and thriving in 50 years, your grandkids in 100 years, then that's the benefit to you, to having these bikes out and about. Okay, yeah, that's the first part. The second part's really short. I'm assuming everyone is convinced now, right? Everyone is thinking, well, obviously all of the world's problems can go away as soon as we get a bike lane on Main Street, right? Instead of diagonal parking. So for the second part, this is going to be really quick. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the things going on here, some of the very small scale things that are building towards these big goals and these big visions. Give you a little bit of a sense of what it can look like to be part of these solutions to make the world a more bike-friendly place. And then I'm going to stop and give the floor to someone who knows way more about this than I do, who can correct all of my mistakes and tell you the real deal. Once I find the right sheet here. So when it comes to building bicycle-friendly communities, I am a member of the BB Pack, which is an all-volunteer group of people who are not experts, but with varying degrees of enthusiasm. We work with the people who are experts, who have the expertise and who have the authority, and we say, what if we put a bike lane there? And they say, no one's ever thought of that before. And then we talk about whether it's possible or not. Basically, it's more complicated than that, but that's the idea. We do a lot of small things, and a lot of small things that theoretically will add up to some big things. Let me give you an example of a small thing, just from my personal experience. Do you know the Brunswick Link bus that drives around, the public transport? So this is something that it's very important for when we talk sort of conceptually about transport networks, that motorized public transport be connected to bikeability. So the Brunswick Link, it has a bike rack on the front. If you're riding your bike, you can get to the bus stop, put your bike on there, ride to where you're going, get off with your bike. This is great. In order for that network to be considered sort of sound, connecting bikes and the motorized public transport, there need to be bike parking racks at the stops for the bus. So that when you get off, you go, some of the stops are like in front of Hannaford. You go shopping, you need to lock up your bike, that sort of thing. So I can tell you that there are 27 stops on the Brunswick Links line, and 13 of them have bike racks immediately visible from when you get off the bus. And I know this because I spent a Saturday afternoon riding my bike on the route of that, holding up the map on my handlebars, being semi-safe, stopping at each one, and noting down which ones had stops, or which ones had bike racks and which ones didn't. It was kind of fun, and it was kind of ridiculous, and I felt silly the whole time. But at the end of that, there was this one little piece of data that I could put into a spreadsheet that is now part of a very small part of a slightly better sense of how the bike infrastructure in this town is working. The reason that I did that particular thing is because of what I think is one of the coolest things that the committee has been involved in the time that I've been there, and that was getting Brunswick certified officially as a bicycle-friendly community from the League of American Bicyclists. I know, right? Maybe you've noticed that sign. There are a couple of those up. This is from their website where they have a database of all the communities that thus certified. You'll notice that in the entire state of Maine, there are only 2, us and Bath. So we're leading on this. There are a couple of universities, one of which is Bowdoin right here. So we really have 2 of the 6 total. So we're leading in the state on this, which is kind of cool, but it's also not that cool. It's a very small thing. Like a lot of things in life, this certification, I don't really think it's about the certification, and I don't think it's about the destination. I think it's about the journey that brought us there, doing things like biking around and looking at that bus, gathering this information, because what the League of American Bicyclists have done is put together a couple hundred criteria for measuring how bike-friendly a community is, and then make you answer all of these questions about it when you apply. So what we did, a bunch of us, is figure out how to answer these questions, bother the town staff who knew the answers to these things, had them explain them to us again and again while we tried to figure out what was going on, learn some of this technical jargon, and ended up producing this pretty good body of data about the bike friendliness of our town and a bunch of ways that we could improve it. Sort of this big document that makes that possible, that then can scale up into the bigger projects, for the real people doing real work, to say, we can inform that a little bit. So, as I wrap up here, I want to tell you that the way the League of American Bicyclists formulates their bike friendliness measures is according to these 5 categories. And obviously, if you're doing something like this, they all have to start with the same letter. So they talk about ways to make the bike community to have more equity, the engineering, where you build the physical infrastructure, education, where you teach kids and adults how to ride safely, and motorists how to share the road, the encouragement, where you show the community the benefits of biking, where you take the silliest member of your committee and hand them a microphone for some reason, and then evaluation and planning. Notice that's really planning, but it couldn't be the 4 E's and 1 P, so they had to put evaluation first, but we know it's planning. And how to integrate that into all of the serious, the real stuff, the real master plan, the real economic development in the town. So I told you a little bit about the bike rack thing. Imagine, this is something I've been doing a lot of, is badgering people about bike racks. Imagine if you have a new apartment building, say, being built, and say the person developing that doesn't really think about bike racks and doesn't really care about bike racks. And so the town has public bike parking on Main Street and in other places. There are nice roads to ride your bike on. We've put a lot of effort into this nice infrastructure, but you move to town and your new apartment doesn't have any place that you can park your bike, and you're 3 stories up. That means that you're excluded from all of that infrastructure. You can't actually make use of it the way somebody who has a house with a garage and can leave their bike there can. So that's an equity issue. That's the kind of thing we mean when we talk about equity. So this is something where we can work on that, and we are working on that, basically in the form of sort of design standards and even hopefully town ordinances that require these sort of new construction to have bike parking that allows people to have that access. So it's an equity problem that then becomes an evaluation and planning problem. These things wrap up with each other a lot. Another very cool thing the committee has done, I can take 0 credit, I've had almost no involvement, but some of my friends and colleagues have done amazing work on a national project called Safe Routes to School, helping encourage more children to be biking and walking to the schools in this town. For that to work, what do they have to do? Well, they have to start with education. They have to be getting into the schools and helping kids know that it's possible to ride to school, helping them know the rules of traffic, that you have to wear a helmet, things like that. So there's an education component. There's an encouragement component. If anyone here has kids, you know that for the last 2 years, there have been a couple bike and walk to school days, one in the spring and one in the fall, and those are a lot of fun. Organizing those is a ton of work that people, not me, I'm taking no credit for this, have done to get people excited about it. Again, that's encouragement. In order for this to be possible, of course, there have to be sidewalks and roads that you can put a kid on a bike on and feel safe about it. That's an engineering problem. You see all of these things wrap up with each other, but these are ways to think about it. The last thing, as I'm coming to an end here, an example of an engineering thing the town is working on right now, there's an improvement on Jordan Avenue over where Kate Furbish School is. The little tykes can get to school a little more easily, hopefully. This is a big process that has had its engineering components, its education components, its encouragement components, and it's something that the town is applying a lot of resources to. It costs a lot of money to do something like that, which means that it's also a political situation, which means it's something that requires a sort of democratic will for people to want to do this. Because history teaches us, and if you read the news, it teaches us every day that we can do really big things if we want to. And if we don't really want to, then we can't do anything. That when we have the political will, the collective will to do things like solve an engineering problem so that kids can ride to school, then it becomes possible and it becomes really easy. So that's why what we're doing here today, what I'm here to do, is in this encouragement category, to convince you of things that you already believed, give you some weird statistics to back it up, and try to convince you that this really matters, even when you're doing a small thing like biking around on a hot day in order to see whether there's a bike rack there that probably hasn't been used in 10 years. And you can tell because there's ivy overgrowing it. So you move the ivy away and say, check. That counts and that matters. And there are a lot of big things in the world, and there are a lot of things that are wrong in the world that are more important than this. But I think that this is important, and I think that it matters. And I hope that you will go out into your communities, to your friends and your coworkers, and help encourage them. I'm going to end with a zinger here, which I'm going to warn you is not funny. But biking is for everyone. I hope everyone agrees on this, but it doesn't happen on its own. Bicycle-friendly communities don't build themselves. Biking is only for everyone if everyone is for biking. You see, it just switches the words. Yeah, not literally everyone, but it's like a critical mass of people. So you don't have to convince everyone you know, but a bunch of them. Okay, thank you so much. Okay.
Is this on? Hazel, hang on. Pause. Is this,
That one, yes.
all right, now it's working. Well, hang on one second. So we're gonna have some question time. Does anyone have questions for Andrew? What I'll do is I'll run the mic around and I'll give it to you. I will ask that you not hold on to it for too long, but I see one question over there.
Hi, thanks for that. That was really fun. I wanted to know, I have a two-part question. What do you think are a couple of ways that Brunswick is struggling or failing to support people who want to cycle? And secondly, what can residents do specifically to help, not necessarily with those things, but help with all cycling besides talking to our neighbors?
I mean, talking to your neighbors is a great start. Convincing people of this sort of thing. Communicating also, I mean, with people in power, when you have, power is a strong word, but like bother town council people about it. You know, when you have ideas, I mean, talk to people on the BBPAC committee, people who have the sort of access to decision making when you have ideas about like, oh, this road is actually in really bad shape and no one's noticed. This is a place where a small sidewalk improvement would really be necessary. When anyone notices these things, because you know, we don't have like a surveillance state monitoring all of these sort of things. It's when people on the street notice these little things that need done that we can then start to pass that up. So that's something that people can do, I think, when you have specific things. You could join BBPAC. There's always a spot. We can always find room for more people. I don't know if that's true, don't hold me to that, but there often is. Where Brunswick is struggling, that I feel comfortable saying here into a microphone on camera. There isn't an immediate thing that comes to mind other than just the general thing that it's not Brunswick specific. It's generally, there's a lot of friction around small things when there doesn't need to be often. Processes often take longer than they need to, and there are things like that are frustrating to someone like me with a short attention span, especially. That I'm like, oh, like we already found the pothole, like why isn't it fixed yet? And it's just hard. There are a lot of things. So a lot of things that seem like a struggle aren't a struggle, they're just sort of the reality of life. Yeah, that's a really boring answer, but it's the one I've got. Oh yeah, here's someone who knows way more than I do. Yeah.
Well, that's not true. So my name is Kirsty Adamowitz, and I'm the Economic and Community Development Project Manager for the town and also the staff liaison for the town. For the Bike Ped Committee. So I work with Andrew a lot, and thank you for this great presentation. But I just wanted to say, I'm an avid bicyclist. I bike to work every day, even in the snow. So I understand what it's like. And I would say that we're really lucky in Brunswick. I find that there's just immense support among the staff to get this sort of thing done for a lot of the reasons Andrew described. So, and I would agree with a lot of what he said. I think it's that, if you want to see bike infrastructure, be vocal to your elected officials and speak up at town council meetings and come to town council meetings and be involved in that way. I think that's one of the best things you can do to move things along. That said, it's true that road projects take forever. It's slow. It's they're expensive all around. I'm not saying that bike infrastructure is necessarily what's causing the expense. It's usually, it's actually, bike infrastructure is usually a small piece of the larger infrastructure project, which is much more costly. But yeah, anyway, they're costly. They take a long time. They take a lot of planning. They take a lot of political discussion for the community to get comfortable with. So I think that just the more we are vocal about it, the better.
All right, anyone have another question for Andrew?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say that all of the Bike Ped committee meetings are open to the public, so you don't have to be on the committee to attend, and it can be worthwhile to just have people in the public sitting in and offering their opinions. It helps a lot with the members.
That is true, and also true for any committee meeting. Ma'am, I saw you had a question.
Yeah, I remember the days when the discussion became where to put the next high school, which was in the middle of the blueberry fields. And the complaints about everybody, how are we going to get there? And, kids have after school soccer, whatever, how do they get back and forth? What I haven't seen when my kids in the late 90s went to high school, there were no discussions about transportation back and forth to school. It was purely you go on the bus, which my kids called the loser cruiser. So they obviously needed a car when they were 16 because you don't go on the loser cruiser. But there was no discussion whatsoever about bike paths to the high school. I mean, why isn't there from Pleasant Hill through the blueberry fields a bike path to the school? That would avoid Main Street. Is there any education going on at the high school level? Because I'm sure that some of these kids want a bike. And what you hear from parents is safety.
Yes, if this is working. Yeah, this is actually, within the last year, something that BBPAC has done is we now have a high school member who represents sort of the high school point of view and comes and tells us what the kids are thinking these days. So we actually, at our last meeting, we're talking about this exact issue and about where exactly in the sort of the trails through the fields there is viable bike routes, what is sort of from the ecological point of view, where bikes are allowed to be there, where they're not allowed to be, which is kind of a tricky question. I have never biked to the high school, so I don't know this, I don't have this mapped in my head very clearly, but this is something that has just come up, because biking down Main Street there, I mean, I go for bike rides up and down Main Street there all the time, and it's not great. It's not the best. I would feel anxious about teenagers biking there in large numbers, not because of the teenagers on bikes, but because of the grown-ups in cars, but either way, that coexistence would be tricky there. So, short answer, yes, that's under discussion, but I don't know anything more than that, because that discussion has just begun. Yeah.
I'll just also add to that how that discussion is sort of working out in BBPAC is we have a master plan that was developed in 2020, and one of the things that was really lacking from that master plan was sort of a 30,000-foot view of what the bike network should be in Brunswick. People we have a complete streets policy, which is great, and we're working to update that as well. But when people hear complete streets, sometimes they think, oh my God, we can't make every street, what would that cost? But what we want to do is look at that 30,000-foot view and connect really key areas. So schools, for example, making sure that schools and neighborhoods are connected, making sure that downtown's connected, Cook's Corner, just key areas, and building a map so that we can understand what it's going to look like and move forward in a very strategic way, and not just wantonly, right? And have a clue about where we're going. So, that's part. So the high school is absolutely part of that that strategy.
Okay, I think for right now, we'll hold the rest of the questions until the end so that we save enough time for our second presenter, Paul. So if you want to go right ahead. I think if I get closer, that's when the buzzing starts. So I'm going to stay here. I'm going to introduce Paul from here. Paul is with the Bike Coalition of Maine, and he will be giving the second half of this presentation. So let's give it up for Paul.
Thanks very much for having us tonight. My name is Paul Drynan. I'm the Active Transportation Director at the Bicycle Coalition of Maine. Active transportation is defined as biking, walking, and we now say rolling. So think wheelchairs, strollers, skateboards, other mobility devices, and for now, under that umbrella, we also include e-bikes. The Bicycle Coalition mission is primarily 3 focus areas: advocacy, that's me, education, and events. So we do bike rides and public engagement events. We do e-bike demos. We run an e-bike loaner program. Many of the libraries, maybe the Curtis Memorial Library had some e-bikes here at one point. That's through the Bicycle Coalition, and I believe that funding comes from Maine Department of Transportation. Speaking of which, we have a special guest here tonight, a real expert. I'm a pretend expert, but Dakota Hewlett is here. Dakota, raise your hand, please. Dakota is the Active Transportation Director for Maine DOT. And I'm glad you're here because pressure's off. We also have a couple of BCM board members, Mark and Henry. Would you raise your hands? And thank you for your service. And speaking of service, we also have a bike ped supporter in Rep. Dan Ankles. Dan, thanks for being here tonight. So after seeing Andrew's great presentation, rather than try to build off on that and bring other things, I really just wanted to take an opportunity to provide a little more context. So, biking. How many people here have ridden a bike at some point in their life? How many people have ridden a bike in the last 10 years? 1 year? 1 month? All right, winter bikers. Excellent. Yeah, biking can be done year-round, even right here in Maine, especially with studded tires. Yes, they make studded tires for bicycles. So biking is for everyone, and I just wanted to see how many people out there have done it. World Bicycle Relief. I don't know what made me think of this. It was like biking is for everyone, and it's not just for fancy Europeans. It made me think of World Bicycle Relief because of the utilitarian factor of a bicycle and how it can really impact a community. So here, most of us think of bicycles as a recreational amenity. Some people think of it as legitimate transportation. I know I do. But in some parts of the world, the bike is the car. And it's not just in places like Amsterdam. I'm thinking particularly of third world countries. There's a great nonprofit called World Bicycle Relief where they donate indestructible bicycles. And so people who would normally have to walk 5+ miles just to get water or run an errand, they have a bicycle. And it really, truly does change people's lives. Another note about European cities, when we think about these cities like Copenhagen with their beautiful bike infrastructure, it's important to note that these cities were not always that way. These cities, at one point, were car-choked communities. And it wasn't until people started dying that they made a choice. And we talked about how to get things done in a community. You have to educate and pressure your community leaders, whether that's a town council, someone in Augusta, the planners. You really have to work with these folks. show them the data. And we now live in a data-driven age. So the argument today shouldn't be an argument, but it's certainly easier than it was 20 years ago. So when we think about those cities, and we hear quite often, oh, well, that's great, but we could never do that here. We can. We just have to want to, and we have to want to work together to get there. Moving on to the next one. Biking is for everyone. So what tripped this one for me was e-bikes. The fastest growing form of transportation in the world. Europe and Asia, the e-bike sales are outpacing us by about 300%. And I know, again, through Efficiency Maine, there is an e-bike rebate program here in Maine. There's also been a program funded by Maine DOT through the Department of Labor where e-bikes have been put into the hands of low-income workforce individuals. And it's a game changer. It is truly a game changer. Does anyone want to guess how many Mainers, what percentage of our population don't drive cars? Throw out a number, anyone. 15%? Double it. 1/3 of Mainers do not drive. Well, I'm assuming we're talking about legal drivers, so yeah, 18 and up. And this is a nationwide statistic, it's not just Maine. 1/3 of our population, for whatever reason, don't drive. So these folks are really relying on something like a bicycle, an e-bicycle, or public transit. There's a lot to talk about here. So again, Andrew, thank you for putting together this. I mean, this is a great sort of summary of how efficient bicycle travel is. And when you look at the space that's taken up by a car, or we've got the bus with the transit on the right. And so one thing I want to point out, if you look at the 4 rows of cars here, what else do we see? We see an okay sidewalk on both sides of the street, maybe 6 feet wide. But over here, that's as wide as one of these car lanes. That could be a bike lane, and we could still have plenty of room for 3 lanes, certainly, of cars. And if we took another row of cars away, we could have a dedicated bus rapid transit lane. Now, we don't need that everywhere in Maine, but for busy downtowns like Brunswick, Portland, Lewiston, Bangor, you think of our more populated areas. If you want bus rapid transit to work, it needs a dedicated lane. If you stick it in with the car traffic, we're not going to get what we call that mode shift. We won't get people to adopt that new use. And we don't want people to give up their cars. No one's taking anyone's car away. The big goal here is trying to get people to just make less trips. Think about that. This is another good one. A great illustration of the space, the trade-off. We're fitting how many bikes into that one parking spot?
10 bikes for one car.
10 bikes for one car. So the thing about cars is they don't pay taxes, right? They don't have families. They don't vote. People do. People vote. People pay taxes. People have families. And I think the point about parking and private property, it's a whole topic out there in the world. There's a great book called The High Cost of Free Parking. So if you want to take a little bit of a deeper dive into parking and the trade-offs we all make, especially with our tax money of funding parking, that is an excellent read. Economic impact. Oh, New York City. I used to live in New York City. I rode my bike all over the city. Did get hit a couple times. Live to tell about it. I never thought I'd see bike lanes in New York City, and now they're everywhere. I used to attend bar in Times Square. Again, car-choked, horrible place to navigate if you're a pedestrian. Times Square has been pedestrianized. I never thought I'd see the day. You mentioned Santiago, Chile. Bogota, I believe, is completely car-free. And when we make these changes, we do see the dollars come into the community. Not just spending dollars, but there are other kinds of spin-off economic impacts. Think about injuries when you get sick or you get hurt, or there's a fatality in your family. That costs us money. And since 2023, the US has seen a 50% increase in injuries and fatalities. In New York City, since they instituted Vision Zero, there's been a 44% decrease in injuries and fatalities. I think the first US city to incorporate Vision Zero is Hoboken or Jersey City, their neighbor. And I think they're on 8 years now without a fatality, which is really quite remarkable. Show of hands, who's familiar with Vision Zero? A few folks, okay. So Vision Zero basically started over in Europe. We talked about those car-choked communities, and then people started dying to an unacceptable rate. There was actually a movement called De Kindermorgen, which was the society pushing back on people getting killed by cars. And they just made a decision. Let's do something differently. And that's what prompted this whole Vision Zero bike lane, protected bikeway movement. And the whole idea behind Vision Zero is getting injuries and fatalities to zero. It can be done, but only with policy followed by infrastructure. Again, if you want a great resource, just Google Vision Zero. The first thing to come up will probably be the nation's leading nonprofit advocate called Vision Zero Network. I was just in a webinar with them today. They're always doing groundbreaking work and releasing more data about the benefits of investing in this kind of infrastructure. Retail, employment, money. So the basic statistic I like to throw out there when it comes to investing in active transportation is for every dollar we invest in active transportation, we see a $3 return. Anyone have money in the stock market? You show me a 3-to-1 return, I'll show you an investor. There's also something called the NFAM that I just learned about. It was developed by a Google fellow, and it's a health assessment database. It stands for, I had to write this down because I can never remember it, National Public Health Assessment Model. This is open source, public, anyone can use it. It's so complicated that I've actually gone to a data expert to ask this person, hey, how do we use this tool? How can Bicycle Coalition of Maine put this to work? I was in a presentation with the person who developed it a couple of months ago, and I was just blown away. So the latest NFAM case study was in a community in California about the size of Portland, Maine, and the return on investment there was $7.61. We cannot afford to not do this. We're saving lives. We're making people healthy. We're taking cars off the road. New York City, Minneapolis, Seattle, Santiago, Chile, more and more American cities are starting to do this. Vision Zero didn't even come to America till the early 2000s. It didn't come to Maine until the fall of 2022. So it's still a very new thing here in Maine. Don't be surprised if you hear it come up more in these types of conversations, especially when it comes to transportation or active transportation. So again, if we're talking about value and construction costs, there was a highway that was supposed to go in west of Gorham, Maine, through a 13-generation farm. The project was called the Gorham Connector. The Maine Turnpike Authority recently announced that they're dropping the project. 4 miles 4 miles, 4-lane highway. When the project was first announced, it was supposed to be $150 million. And when pressed, they revisited those numbers. I believe their second cost estimate was $230, $250 million. This was a couple years ago. People kept pressing them and pressing them and pressing them. And as the project got closer to going live and happening, they released, I want to say, halfway through 2024, $330 million. It hasn't even been built yet. If this highway does ever get built, we know it's going to be $400 million plus. So let's just call it $400 million. $100 million per mile, and the cost savings, estimated cost savings by Maine Turnpike Authority, 4 minutes. So $100 million a mile or $100 million a minute. Bicycle Coalition of Maine and a lot of other folks thinks that we can spend our transportation dollars much, much more wisely, especially when we talk about those returns on investment, minimum of 3 to 1. Health outcomes. When we talk about health, it's important to remember that there's not just physical health, there's mental health, there's emotional health. And it's not so much affecting me, like a middle-aged guy, male, children, elderly, folks who need to be worried about getting to school safely, or chronic disease, heart disease, diabetes. These things drop drastically when people walk and bike. Again, we can't afford to not do this. More figures, and this reminded me that the average daily trip in Maine, this is an average between a commute and an errand. And yes, it applies to the county. Anyone want to guess? Throw out a number. What's the average daily trip in Maine? Number?
20 minutes.
20, well, mileage.
No mileage? Say 12 miles.
12 miles. Anyone else?
2 miles.
2? 3? 5. Not bad. We're there. And yeah, so it sounds kind of weird to think of 5 miles for a trip here in the state of Maine, but when you consider that someone in downtown Portland might walk a block to the convenience store or a few blocks to work, someone in the county is probably driving, 10, 20 miles, it all averages out. Totally doable on a bicycle, definitely doable on an e-bike. The range of e-bikes now, pushing 50 miles, some more. So that's going to get you home, to work and home easily. Bicycle-friendly communities. I know that there it is. Give yourselves a round of applause. Brunswick, one of 2 states in the state of Maine, one of 2 towns. That really is quite an achievement. I was just at the the Bike League's national conference called the Bike Summit in Washington, D.C. last week. And my head was spinning with the amount of knowledge that I came home with. Couple of the big takeaways were the fact that the guidebooks that are used by our folks at the state and in our municipalities and our MPOs, our metropolitan planning organizations, there's 2 big guidebooks, NACTO and AASHTO. They've both sort of come to the table together, and the 2 books that used to be fairly different are now fairly similar. And they're both based on 15 years of research. So unlike the traffic engineering field, which is predicated on studies and papers, like white papers, but not so much hard science, the NACTO and the AASHTO guides are real tools that we can use and give to our municipal folks at this town level to use as a guidebook. And something that else is new is the NACTO guide can now be used for federally funded projects. That's a big step for bike ped advocates because I don't know, Dakota, correct me if I'm wrong, but NACDO's always been a little more bike ped friendly, and AASHTO's traditionally been a little less.
NACDO stands for the National Association of City Transportation Officials, so being that it's more urban focused, yes.
Yeah, thank you. And the other highlight for me was getting to meet a hero author, Wes Marshall, who wrote a great book called Killed by a Traffic Engineer. So if you want to learn more about traffic engineering and how highly flawed that trade is and why, I highly recommend that book. And he was just super down-to-earth guy, and good on him. I mean, he's a career traffic engineer who has realized how highly flawed his own trade is. So he's written a whole book about it. Again, highly recommend that. The 5 E's. So this is relatively new. The E's, the big E used to be enforcement. It's been replaced with the word equity. This is a big step in the right direction for a couple reasons. Enforcement, we know, just is not an effective strategy. Maybe if you live in a tiny town and there's one big road like a drag strip, and the local police officer hangs out there and people will slow down if they know he's there, or she is there. But we know that enforcement's not a really effective tool. And on top of that, our law enforcement professionals are strapped. They're overworked, and traffic enforcement is not a priority for them. As a result, enforcement is down, way down, nationwide. It's an issue in some communities, but the fact is, it's not the most effective strategy. Evaluation and planning, important. Encouragement, we all like to be encouraged, that's important. Education's definitely important. Engineering, that's the big one. Speed is what kills. And the difference between someone getting injured and killed, it's around 30 miles per hour. The difference between those outcomes changed dramatically. We also now have distracted driving and vehicle size. We've all seen these pickup trucks and SUVs with these monstrous front ends, which also dramatically affect the outcome of a crash. Right now, we can't say equity because of the current administration in Washington. So as a transportation professional, it's pretty frustrating. We've gone through our website at Bicycle Coalition, we've gone through all our grants, and we've scrubbed all of the forbidden words, there's a lot of them, from our grants. We're not happy about it, but we feel like if we want to provide the services that the community needs, we got to play the game. So I've been saying transportation equity for about 3 years now. Anyone want to guess what we're saying now? Transportation freedom. Transportation freedom. I have no problem. Transportation freedom. I'll say it all day long if that's what helps us get funding to make bike lanes and make your community safer. I don't care what we call it. We just want it to work. So if you've looked at our website or other people's websites recently, if you noticed some changes, that would be why. We talked about Vision Zero. A few stats. Traffic violence in this country is on par with handgun violence. It's really that bad. We're looking at about 42,000 deaths per year. And these are preventable deaths, right? Mostly caused by speed. Speed is a result of being failed by our traffic engineers and our road design. It's America's love with the automobile. We just made roads so people could get from one point to the other as fast and as efficiently as possible. It's known as level of service, or throughput, or capacity. So now when I'm confronted by a traffic engineer telling me we can't make change because of a level of service, I'm asking them about the level of safety. So if we're going to talk about LOS, level of service, We also need to have a conversation about level of safety, right? So this is one of the tricks I pulled from West Marshall. Speed, speed, speed. We need safe streets, we need safe speeds, lower speed limits, and we need some safe speed technology. Could be a speed camera, could be something in the car that reads that speed limit sign, and that technology exists and forces the car to travel at that speed. So we do have options available to us. I feel like I've talked enough. I do have a couple of sheets on the table back there about services that are available from BCM if you want to bring that into your community. I have a couple of business cards. Honestly, this is a big topic. We're really just scratching the surface here tonight. We haven't even talked about the nitty-gritty policies or the infrastructure styles, traffic calming, safe streets for all, complete streets. There is quite a lot under this active transportation umbrella. So I'd be happy to answer some questions, and honestly, feel free to reach out to me at BCM anytime if you want to talk more. Thanks.
Great, let's have a quick round. I saw one very excited hand.
Yeah. Thank you both for this great presentation and information. I have a question. Could we get these bicycle sharing companies into Brunswick where you have several bicycles standing in different areas, and with an app you could use it for a couple of miles and then put it somewhere else? Because I think students and maybe even people who do not have the space in the garage could use it, and it would also show that we are promoting this. And then the other thing is, I'm from Europe, so we of course learned bicycling when we started to walk, and we also learned safety, traffic safety in school. And I think it really starts with the education to get it close to the kids, to know that they're safe on the street, and to make it more safe for parents to let the kids actually go. And then with Dookie, you need to have these trails that are clearly assigned for them and maybe barricaded on one side as you see it in Boston or so. And maybe it would be good to see that a little bit more in Brunswick, so that you know that you can leave your kids safely out on the street and go by themselves to school and stuff like that.
Yeah, right. I mean, we are not the litmus test here. We're not the target audience. Think children and elderly. If it's not safe for them, don't ask other people to do it, right? So bike share, yeah. Bike shares, there are more and more in other cities around the country. It requires a little bit of research to find out like whether your community is ready for one or not. I would highly recommend looking at Capital Bike in Washington, D.C. It's the best bike share program I've ever seen in this country. It's very efficient. The app is very straightforward and it's just awesome. It's the best I've ever seen. And because of that, and because they have bike lanes, everyone uses the bike share. So when I was in DC for the summit, right around the corner from my apartment was a dock, a bike share dock, 30 bikes long. And the morning I left, there were only 2 bikes in it. They're out, people are using them. So that was one, and education. Bicycle Coalition of Maine has tried and failed, I think 3 times now, to pass a bill to make bicycle pedestrian education mandatory alongside driver ed. And we've just always received a lot of pushback on that. Maybe we'll try to bring that back in the next legislative session. But yes, it is important, and it should start young. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay.
Hi, earlier Christine mentioned about the 2020 master plan. And I remember, Paul, it was your predecessor, Jim Tassi, who came here, and we had a pretty extensive visioning kind of mapping session. I think it was at the middle school, a couple of sessions. And there were a lot of great ideas, but I never saw the outcome of that master plan. And about 4 months ago, I tried to find it on the town's website, and I had difficulty navigating that. And I just, a general comment about if Andrew and others of BBPAC could just put some contact information up for, people, citizens who want to reach out and talk to you all about issues, that would be helpful.
Yes, that's a really good point. So the master plan is on the planning website. So if you go to the home page and then you go to government, and then over towards the right, there's planning and development, and the master plan's in there. So I know it's a long-winded way to get there, but we also actually have an email address. It's bikewalk@brunswickme.gov, bikewalk@brunswickme.gov. So if you have a bike-related question or walking-related question that you want to direct to the Bike Ped Committee, that's probably the easiest and fastest way. And I monitor that inbox, so you'll be reaching me. And that's a lot easier to tell you that than my first and last name, which is Adamowitz, and you'll never remember that. So, so bikewalk@brunswickme.gov.
And I can also link those materials on our town website. So I'm working on collecting all of these recordings. We produce the recordings and we list them available for people to see after the fact. So in the description, I can also include links to the Bike Ped Master Plan as well as what contact info I can provide, including spelling Chrissy's name for you. So let me get my steps in. I'll go to that side really quick. Any questions on this side? Okay. Yeah, this should be a pretty quick one. You mentioned the e-bike rebate program, and in the past we had tried to access that and were told that it was pretty much only in Portland. Is there a way to do that in Brunswick?
There should be. Actually, I was attempting to advance a bill that would restructure the program and bring it more in line with Efficiency Maine's other rebate programs, insulation, heat pumps, et cetera. Right now, it's a standalone program, and between you and everyone else, there's a fair amount of stigma attached to it. You know, rumors, e-bikes catch fire and all that stuff, which are patently false unless you buy a really, really cheap bike off Amazon, which I don't recommend. Yeah, so right now that is true, and we would like to see the program restructured. So please reach out to us if that's something you want to be involved with. A personal story goes a long way when it comes to trying to get bills passed in the legislature. You know, this is how an e-bike would change my life, and I know that Maine Won't Wait Climate Action Plan is finally incorporating more around active transportation. Anything we can do to reduce vehicle miles traveled is a big deal.
Brunswick also has a climate action plan that includes similar work. So we're getting started and we're working on it. You have a question over here?
I have the question if you have looked at all comparison with the town of Davis in California, which is completely biking. It's got a university, obviously it's got a lot more students there, but comparison-wise, it's not a big city. What are their numbers in, with physical infrastructure, with teaching kids? What do they do to encourage anybody that moves there to start biking? Obviously, they're a good example.
They are a great example, and they're definitely a model community. And so what we typically see to get these things in place in a community, we need three things. We need a community champion, and you already have that with the PB PAC. You've got an engaged community. You need elected official buy-in, and you need municipal support. So you got to get your planners, your economic development people, engineers, you've got to get them on board. But if you can get two of those things, people and elected officials, municipal staff, and people, any two of those three things, you can typically leverage the third. So that's the formula. And if you need help getting more stuff done in Brunswick, we're here to help you with that.
Speaking of elected officials, we have two here that have comments.
Thank you. First off, Paul and Andrew, thank you for the presentations. I especially appreciate the creativity since you both showed the same PowerPoint presentation, which was really interesting. I've never seen that before.
Would you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. Jamie Eckert, District 2 Counselor. And I think we have two great opportunities right now in the community to show we really care about bicycle and pedestrians in the community. Number one is the Jordan Avenue project. That's been getting a lot of the press. because it's very expensive. It's very expensive, but it's not because of the isolated bike pedestrian lane. It's expensive because the road really needs to be rebuilt, and there's a huge culvert to replace. But that is a central artery to connect our two basic downtowns, Cook's Corner and the downtown. And so I hope people come out to support that when that comes up back before the council. The second opportunity is the artery from Main Street, Bath Road, all the way out Main Street to Mere Point to Middle Bay. A huge portion of that is scheduled under the Municipal Partnership Initiative Program, DOT joint program, to get redone between Bath Road and McCoy. And another piece, Middle Bay Road, is scheduled to get done by the town. So anyone who's ridden these roads on bicycles or cars know how awful this stretch can be bicycling. And so over the next 2 years, I hope people will come out, because the opportunity to get people from the downtown out down to the high school, Safe Routes to School, across Main Street from Meadowbrook, Botany Place to the junior high and Coffin. Really great opportunities. And I think it's simpler than people make it sound, because whereas Jordan Avenue is expensive, on Main Street, the challenge, I think, comes down to lane width. Anyone who has gone down Main Street knows that we have how many bike lanes? We have one bike lane that goes from Warmings to Richards on one side of the road only. And when you get down to Pleasant Hill Road, it's almost 15 feet wide. So I think the challenge here is to very simply change our striping plan and our lane widths. And that's a second thing I'd ask for people's help on, is right now our town ordinance has a minimum lane width of 11 feet. If we could make that minimum lane width 10 feet, or as otherwise approved by the engineer, that could make a huge difference, and it's just paint. So I hope people will come out when that comes before the council. I'm hoping that's going to come before the council in the next month or so, but that could make a huge difference. And the third thing is on this main artery, I'm hoping to have a meeting in May, to have a community meeting about this whole bike route. And that could be a great time to come out and express your concerns. So these two arteries, Jordan Avenue from downtown out to Cook's Corner and downtown out to the high school, we could make a huge difference in downtown to Middle Bay Road going into the landing property on the back way. Just changing the striping can make a huge difference, but there's other traffic calming measures I'm hoping we can get DOT's help with, like with the striping plan, and some simple improvements to make these things really could make a huge difference for our town over the next 2 years. Thank you.
That all sounds like really important, great work. It's all about connectivity. We talked about it before, connecting our town centers to our schools, especially. If you can connect to other amenities like grocery stores, that's great. But if you can get more than one corridor in and out or through your community, that's a big win. And you have support from, I mean, Dakota's been a game changer from us, for the state of Maine, in my opinion. So feel free to reach out to us or Dakota for help with that.
Before I pass it off to Representative Ankleys, I also just want to make a quick plug on Councillor Ecker's note. If you want to stay up to date, go to the town website, sign up for our Notify Me system, for town council updates. You get an email blast every time there's a new agenda. You can see what's coming down the pipeline. You can choose what to attend. Or if you have interest in specific committee-related ongoings, there is a list you can sign up for to get notifications about our Bike Ped Committee, about Conservation Commission, anything. We have so many committees in this town. There's plenty of interesting committees, meetings to attend or watch.
Thanks. I'm Dan Ankleys. I'm one of the state reps from Brunswick. We have just 3 of us. Before I ask my question to you, I wanted to just thank Councillor Ecker, because when I reached out to him, because I have 2 kids who need safe routes to schools also, he was able to get into the capital improvements plan a future crosswalk where Meadowbrook Road meets Botany Place and Main Street. And when that comes online, that's going to make it so much safer for people going to middle school and HBS. So I'm just very, very happy, and thank you for that. I always wanted to thank you in public for that.
It's not built yet.
It's not built yet, but but getting it into the plan is a big deal, as you know. So my question for you is, Vision Zero, we've really struggled so far to pass a statewide Vision Zero thing. I've been on that transportation committee when we struggled the first time, and even this session. So I guess my question is, it seems like while we wait for the state climate to get a little better, does Vision Zero have model ordinances for municipalities of different population sizes and configurations that we can, as a community, look at to pick and choose what might be good for us as Brunswick? And just wondering, like, if not them, who has stuff like that we can look at?
Yeah, thanks, Stan. Great question. So right now with Vision Zero, given that all of the municipal planning organizations have rolled this out to their client communities, if you're not in an MPO community, I know Brunswick is, but there may be some very rural communities, especially in the county, that aren't aware of Vision Zero, but then again, they don't have the population base, they don't have as much cars and people and conflict like a municipality like Brunswick would have. So at this point, BCM is really focused on working with individual municipalities who want to adopt that. The MPOs have rolled it out, the feds have funded it, they may continue to fund it. US DOT and Maine DOT have something very adjacent called Toward Zero. And it's important to know that Vision Zero is not a policy. So if your municipality adopts Vision Zero, it's not a mandate, right? So we call it a paradigm shift. And the shift is getting people to think about changing our streets to make them safer for all road users. So that's one way to think about it. I like to use a medical metaphor and think of it as a code of ethics. That, for me, is the really simplest way to describe Vision Zero. You're making an ethical commitment to make your streets safer in your municipality. Once you've done that, once you become a Vision Zero community, now you opened up the door to funding opportunities. You go to the front of the line. And under that Vision Zero umbrella, there's all kinds of strategies to answer your question. And the big framework today is what we call Safe Streets for All. Complete Streets is still there, but the big one now is Safe Streets for All. That's what we look to, and that's where the money comes from the feds. Does that answer your question, Dan?
Yes.
Great, thanks.
Okay. I think we'll take one more question, and then, if you have any others, you can funnel them towards me, and I'll make sure to connect you with the appropriate folks. Any other questions while we're here? No? Everyone wants to get home for dinner? Got it.
Well, then I'll take this opportunity. I'm the librarian here, one of them, and I just want to let you folks know that there's also, thanks to Bicycle Coalition of Maine, next week we are doing a bike repair right here in this room. So in addition to that, Bicycle Coalition of Maine has been showing up at all of our repair cafes, which are held monthly in the region. So once again, it's a wonderful way that if you have a bike at home, you can get it fixed up. And if you don't think you have the tools, guess what? We have them here in our library. We have about 1,300 items that are not books, and we're helping communities around the state and abroad level that up with our partners' help. So please keep that in mind as you go forward and bicycle around this summer.
What time is the repair cafe?
The Repair Cafe happens monthly. We can check it's on our website always. Next week, the program, you just sign up online. It's on Thursday night, 6 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. And let's give one more round of applause.
All right, awesome. Thank you, everybody.